Hello, it is Spappo, this is Jasper, and today I'm excited to welcome you back to my studio to talk about a subject that is really near and dear to my heart, which is how I live a wonderful, rich, creative life managing several chronic health conditions. If you're new here or don't know my practice very well, hi, I'm Jasper. I'm a graphic designer and artist living in Milwaukee, and I currently am balancing a day job, starting an artist market / collective called Superb Market, and maintaining my own personal practice on the side. So that's a lot for anyone. And then on top of that, I am also chronically ill with a few different conditions. I kind of went back and forth on how I wanted to break down this video, whether I wanted to detail all my main symptoms and how I manage each of those, which seemed like a lot and very intimidating because I'll go through the list of my diagnoses still. It's a few chronic kind of complex conditions, and honestly, I was a little scared that would be too close to giving actual medical advice, which I'm not here to do. I am not a medical professional of any kind. I am a wannabe YouTuber with a BFA, which qualifies me to make you either a bomb latte, cocktail, or logo, not necessarily to help you figure out what chronic health conditions you may have. Not really my bag, baby. So I wanted to mostly just give you some more general tips on how I manage my practice on top of my health, and also answer a few sweet little questions from Instagram. So without further ado, let's get into my general background. So I deal with 2 chronic physical health issues and then a couple of other mental health things. So in terms of physical health, I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder that mostly impacts my joints and skin. Basically anything with collagen in it is a little funky in my body. It means that my joints hyperextend and get injured stupid easily, and I also have some widespread pain, some clumsiness, a few other symptoms here and there. Oh, migraines are another big one with that. And then I also have fibromyalgia, which is essentially a neurological disorder, I think. Fibromyalgia, they really don't know that much about currently, which is so fun. I love having a chronic illness that even my doctors don't know that much about. But basically, my brain interprets things that would not otherwise be painful to people as painful. In a way that can be measured on an MRI, which is crazy. But yeah, my brain literally responds like it's being attacked when it super isn't. Fun stuff. And then I also have, in the mental health department, complex PTSD, I have DID and ADHD, along with a few other things that kind of come and go as a result. It's kind of up in the air on if I have a mood disorder or if it's just hey, you witnessed the horrors and now you're still here. I think a lot of my mood issues and those kinds of problems are mostly to do with the complex PTSD. That is my primary diagnosis. That one is kind of all encompassing. And most of these conditions I have had likely most of the 23 years of my life, with the exception of the fibromyalgia. That's new. That's a year old. Still settling into that one. So that's a lot. And my work life is a lot, which begs the question, how do I balance that? Because that is so much to deal with. So I broke it down into 3 main bullet points of the main things that I try to keep in mind and really work with as I'm trying to navigate this complex kind of amorphous blob that I have to juggle as I'm making my creative dreams come true. Sorry, that's the most insane way I could have put that, but balancing chronic health shit is weird with such a self-imposed job like mine. But my 3 bullet points are as follows. 1, do it honestly and imperfectly. 2, schedule equipment maintenance or your equipment will schedule it for you. And 3, accepting seasons around creativity. Firstly, doing it honestly and imperfectly. The number one piece of advice that I've gotten along the way is from this podcast called Creative Pep Talk with Andy J. Pizza. It is very fun and very uplifting, but he got asked the question of how he manages to do as much as he does as someone with ADHD. To my knowledge, I don't think he has any other conditions, just the ADHD, which is proof, like, I've got a lot of shit going on. If you've got like a thing going on, that's still valid as hell. These are all individual issues that would be disabling for most people. So he kind of expands on how he does so much with his ADHD, and he frames it as doing it all imperfectly, which is so important, I think. It's so easy to get in your head and just be like, well, I can't do it the right way, so maybe I shouldn't do it at all, and shit like that. That's like really self-defeating and gets you nowhere. And I found it's really, really powerful to just accept that you're not gonna do it all the right way. In my case, I'm gonna miss emails. I'm gonna not get as much done as I thought I could because I somehow always fail to factor in that I'm going to have bad health days. I'm getting better at that, but for a long time I just wasn't factoring that into my schedule, and I was imagining well, if everything goes perfectly, as I hope it will with no evidence, let's just try to hope it'll all work out. And holding myself to these really high standards that were just not happening. And I was getting really discouraged until I really made myself sit down and be like, hey, if I'm gonna do this at all, it's gonna be imperfectly. Balanced out by being honest about that. Really trying to be as transparent as possible, especially when working with other people. And just be like, hey, I'm really struggling with this thing. Because more often than you'd think also, people are either A, really willing to adjust to that, or B, really willing to help come up with a solution with you. Because if it's really that big of a deal, they're often willing to be like, hey, how can I sit down with you and help you make this thing happen? Both of those conclusions are gonna help you get where you wanna be, so long as you're willing to accept that it might not look exactly how you might have thought. So that's the first one, doing it honestly and imperfectly. Secondly, scheduling equipment maintenance, or your equipment will schedule it for you. My fiance has this print up in his studio. I don't know if he still does, but he did for a while, that said this. And I think it's such a funny way of phrasing it, but it's real as hell, which is if you don't take care of yourself, you are just making it inevitable that something will pop up where it will be crisis level enough that you have to drop everything. And hey, isn't it so much nicer to get to schedule it? So I definitely recommend factoring in break time and rest time and not being willing to budge on that much. You can move things around, you can reschedule, whatever, but that time is not optional, if that makes sense. I, for a long time, fell into this trap of being like, well, I would love to take some time for myself, but I have homework to do, or I have this launch next week, or I have an art market that I'm running in 3 days. And it feels like there's no way that I could possibly take a break. And I just have to remind myself that the question is not if I'm going to take the break, it is when I'm going to take the break. And if I schedule it in a way that's more opportune for me, I am more likely to have a chill time with it. And also, I don't have to let it get to the absolute crisis level. I don't have to wait until my joints are not staying in fucking socket and I'm crying and having a PTSD episode. It just doesn't need to wait that long. I can find when I'm burnt out and overwhelmed, but not quite at crisis level, and be like, okay, let's take some time for me. Let's do some genuine self-care. Let's make some art that we're not sharing or selling. Taking care of yourself is a non-negotiable, especially if you're a disabled creative, in my opinion. Lastly, my final piece of advice I want to leave you with before I get into the Q&A is accepting seasons around creativity. By which I mean, there's all these different creative tasks that we have to do. We have to market ourselves. We have to make the things that we're trying to make. We have to figure out a way to share what we're doing with people. And it can feel really overwhelming to try to do all these things at the same time. So I am just trying to embrace the cycle of seasons around these things. Like when I'm too tired to make any new work, maybe that's the time that I dedicate to making a sweet little YouTube video or updating my website or things like that that are just different. And cycling through these seasons where I'm really being intentional about one or two of these things. Not to say that I'm not still making new product or doing those things, but I pick a thing to highlight and prioritize and hone in on for a season, usually tied up to a literal season of the year, which means that each quarter of the year I get a different priority every quarter, but it's only one priority per quarter, which helps me really balance my efforts and not accidentally burn myself out, because being a creative is so many different jobs all rolled up into one, and you are much more likely to burn yourself out if you are trying to expect yourself to do all of these seasons at once. Break it down. You don't have to be everywhere at once. Life does not end at 22. You know what I mean? You have your whole life ahead of you to figure out what the right way to do all these things is. Just focus on one thing at a time. Deep breaths. You got this. I feel like that was really preachy, but like important also. I also have some sweet Q&A questions from a couple of my very sweet college friends. Firstly, my friend Rowan at EmoFruit on Instagram. He says, I spend all my energy making and forget to budget for cleaning. How do you maintain your workspace? Firstly, this kind of ties back to the schedule equipment maintenance one. Find ways to hold yourself accountable. If you're anything like me, if there's nothing making you do it, much like those rests, it just kind of falls by the wayside, especially when you have other things with deadlines. I found honestly like making content is really helpful for this because it forces me to maintain at least some of my space. I'm really into needy streamer overload right now, and there's this one text from the game that I was like, unfortunately, this is real as hell. This is me. I'll put it on screen here, but Ame's like, haha, it's so funny that like people think that my space is so clean because everything that's off camera is a mess. That's real. I really do focus on like just making it a non-negotiable, and also making that its own creative season is getting my studio in order. Another thing I found helpful is just like treating it like another art project and finding ways to make getting your like aesthetic little house like to feel like its own creative project, because it is. It truly is, especially like setting up a studio space. Just approach it with curiosity and interest in making the creative process better for you, and treat it like its own project. And then Jamie at Teaspoon on Instagram says, how do you do this crazy art shit and also take care of yourself? I always have to sacrifice one. So for a long time, I did not think about this nearly as much as I should have. And now I have fibromyalgia, because you can actually stress yourself out to the point where you get a new autoimmune condition. Don't recommend it. It's been bad. But honestly, if you've seen the movie The Substance, I think that's a really important watch for a lot of creative people. It's like gnarly and definitely like body horror, so if that's not your jam, heed the warning there. But it's about this like retiring TV show host who is dealing with like wanting to be this energetic younger version of herself, and letting that younger version of herself take from her. And I was like, oh, this is kind of what I'm doing when I'm overworking myself into like really severe burnout and health issues. Hey, that sucks. You don't want to be in that position. I ended up basically forced to take a bunch of time off after graduating college because I made myself really sick. I was like in and out of urgent care. It was dramatic, and it was just from like overwork. How do I like actionably do something with that though is a different story, and I'm still definitely learning. One thing that I do is I limit my to-do list and I categorize it. So I keep some level of balance there. Oh, the thing I was saying with The Substance. Respect the balance is like a repeating thing. I literally made a print of it because I think it's so important. Yeah, respecting the limitations that your body has and also the way that you need to balance all the things in your life. So crucial. I tend to break down my to-do lists now into like no more than 5 small bullet points per category of life per day, which usually each of my big creative responsibilities gets a category, and then my house gets a category, and then my self-care takes a category, among other things, because I usually have a lot of things to juggle. I like to make it very difficult for myself. But yeah, hopefully that's all insightful and helpful and changes your life forever. I think that's a reasonable goal. But thank you so much for joining me for this kind of stream of consciousness, chatty little video. Hopefully this is enjoyable to watch and somewhat helpful. I'm still so nervous talking about my health in front of the camera, as I'm sure you can tell. But only one way to get more comfortable with it, right? Okay, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll talk again soon. Bye.